G'day everyone, Michael Beresford here from OpenCorp. Welcome to this month's late night edition of Facebook Live Q&A. Apologies for the late start, that was my fault, audio and tech issues. But I promise, we'll pack a bunch of value into the next 45 to 60 minutes or so. I'm here with the dynamic duo. One is the well-dressed brother. The other one is the brother who can dance. I'm with Al and Matt Lewison. Matt's our special guest. Cam's off on another holiday. I've lost track of where they are and where he's gone. But for those of you that are new to the Facebook Q&A series, the whole purpose of this forum is that you've got a whole decade's worth of collective property investing experience here, and we're here basically to answer your questions. So jump on in the chat section, send your questions through. That's what we're here to answer. But while you're getting those through, obviously you know Al, a tried and true part of our fabric here at Facebook Q&A. But I'll introduce Matt. Matt's Al's younger brother. And Matt and I go way back. Matt and I actually played footy together 20 years ago when our bodies were actually worked.
Standing up, guys.
Oh,
5 years ago.
You never turned up to training, so you can't talk. But we always got on pretty well, mate, didn't we, when we were playing footy?
Absolutely.
I guess had similar mindsets, and fast forward 20 years, I guess we find ourselves at OpenCorp. But I guess the journey was, there were a few steps in between there. Matt's a pretty modest guy, so I'll give you a rundown on what he did. For those of you in Melbourne, you might know the big ozone development out at Knox. In his early 20s, Matt was involved in the senior development team with regards to that project. Did such a good job, he actually got headhunted up to run Peat Limited, which is the third biggest landholder in Australia, a land property development company. At the age of 26, he was running their whole Queensland business. So thanks for joining us, Louis. Great to have you along. And I guess really what we were thinking was a great topic to discuss here, and something that I've always learned from you, I guess, is an awareness around what the challenges are that people have getting into the property market. We always hear that property's becoming unaffordable and it's hard to save the deposit and all those well-trodden messages. Yeah. But maybe give everyone a run through while these questions are coming through, guys, on some of the challenges that you see for people, especially young people, entering in the property market, and maybe the older investors at the other end of the spectrum.
I think first we should just make sure everyone's aware Matt's a bit of a dork, and he'll just talk about global stats and what's happening intergalactically. We'll pull him up, we'll keep him on check, but there's going to be some facts and figures and stats here that are very impressive, but we'll try and keep it in check and keep it relevant for everyone. Sorry about that.
You couldn't resist, could you?
No, I couldn't resist.
All right. Well, look, I suppose the best place to start is even talking about my journey through property and how that started, and actually coincides with Al's journey through property as well. We were really fortunate. I'm sure you all know. Al probably talked about our father Steve, and I guess the mentorship he gave us in property right through our teens. And I was fortunate. I was able to buy my first property at 18 years of age, and the only reason I was able to do that was because I co-invested with my brother Al. So we pooled our money to buy our first property together. I remember back then, I think, what was it, about 120 grand we paid for our unit that we bought out in Baronia. We put up the 20%, so we had 10 grand, or just over 10 grand each, and borrowed $100,000 for that property. So that was our entry into the property market, and that was the launch pad for everything else that we've been able to do in property. You look at property prices today, and they've gone up substantially. Obviously, to get into property in Australia these days, you need at least probably, we're getting close to $100,000 for even entry-level property. If you want to keep your LVR under 80%. So we're really fortunate. We're able to have a great mentorship very early, but also to get into the market through co-investing together. Now, when I look a bit more broadly, and we've had over 100,000 people come to us over the last decade, asking us for information about how to get into the property market, or how to invest, or even how to grow their portfolio for some seasoned investors that come to us. We've been able to help a couple of thousand of them, but there's a great many who just are miles away from even having a deposit or being able to qualify for a loan. So that's something that's obviously given us cause to really focus on this and find new ways to try and help people to get into that market. But it's not a trend that's just happening in Australia. I mean, it's something that when you look more broadly around the world, in the US, in the UK and Europe, home ownership rates are falling pretty swiftly, as they are in Australia, and we talk about it a lot in the office. But as of today, if you're under the age of 40, you're over 15% less likely to own a house compared to those of us 20 years ago who were getting into the market. And obviously that age bracket of under 40 is going to carry through. Soon it'll be under 50s, then it'll be under 60s. But we're even seeing those older age brackets as well, home ownership rates falling and falling.
So just to put that into some context, so I was doing some quick numbers in my head. So basically, if you're aged under 40, 1 in 6 less than 40-year-olds today owns a home compared to historically in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
a
dropping.
fair percentage.
What
isn't
are
it?
they doing? Are they renting, living with mum? What are they doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're renting for longer. I mean, there are some lifestyle elements to it as well, but a lot of them have identified that it's very hard to get into the market. They're unlikely to be able to get in. So they're saying, well, if I can't get into the market soon, and the amount of time they have to save for a deposit is about twice as long as it was for people 15 years ago. So they're saying, well, it's going to be a long, hard road. I'm going to go on a holiday instead. So instead of actually saving and putting into getting the deposit, they're burning that money and going
living
the dream, which makes it harder to get in.
Yeah.
So it's a huge challenge. And when you look at it, the other end of the spectrum, so between 2000, you said I was going to use some dorky numbers. So the Hilda report, which is a report that comes out, I think it's from an institute in Victoria who does it every year, and they look at housing across Australia and also, I guess, duress for people living in housing, how people live. It's a huge survey of thousands of people. And what they're finding is that from 2002 to 2014, people moving into retirement, so people in the 60 to 65-year-old age bracket, in 2002, on average, had no mortgage. Today, they average $300,000 of debt when they're hitting that 60 to 65-year-old age bracket. So that's obviously making huge changes to how they're moving into retirement. And yes, their house value is a lot higher, but most of the wealth they own is in their own home, not in any other assets. So they're going into retirement with that debt and, yeah, a lot of wealth, but it's in a house that's not generating an income for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's huge challenges in Australia.
And I mean, I hear your number. I know the number of 122,000 for the first house that we purchased, and probably for people listening, I know I talk to people and they give me a funny eye movement, or their eyes roll, or their head shakes, and I'm like, you think I'm lying to you? I'm not. But the number sounds unrealistic, and what follows up with that is I go, well, that's easy. I could have done it then too. And I don't think it is relative because wage growth slowed over the last few years, but. Have dwelling types changed as well? Like people used to go, I have to live in a quarter acre with a nice big house and raise my family there. Is what they're looking to live in changing? Is it making it harder or easier?
Yeah, it's something that's kind of contradictory because block sizes are getting smaller on average in Australia, but we also have the largest houses in the world now on average for the new houses getting built. So we're putting bigger houses on smaller blocks. So people are trying to invest and have everything in their house. Obviously the house we grew up in had no garage, no carport. It's just a 3-bedroom house with 1 living area.
Had a blue bedroom, walls and roof was amazing.
And vinyl floors. But that was where our parents could buy, and that was on the urban fringe, and they moved 20 kilometres away from their family and friends, and following that, all their family and friends ended up moving into similar suburbs. So they just took what they could get. Now people, I mean, the suburbs are a lot bigger in Australia now, so you go out 60 k's if you're going southeast. So you can't, for many people, it's not a choice of do I just go to the urban fringe to buy my next house. And people generally tend to move within 7 kilometres of where they were living.
I think that's a really good example. It's probably an indicator that we're all getting old pretty quickly. But I remember when I just finished uni, so I was 20, 21. A friend of mine had bought a place out in Narre Warren. So for those of you that aren't from Melbourne, if you look at Narre Warren relative to the urban fringe today, it's basically halfway between the city and the urban fringe. Now, just under 20 years ago, when we went out there for a housewarming party, it was like, roads had just gone in, muddy hills, sparse development, and in the space of 20 years, you think about all the population growth in the urban sprawl that's happened. It's really interesting, I guess, how that feeds into the whole planning cycle, how governments plan for cities, and I guess when you know where to look, you can tell where the population growth's going to go.
They'll have a barrel fire in the backyard where they lit things up and you'll sit around drinking 3 empty cans in.
That's it.
The rest of the days.
Your kind of parties.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's a good point you make, and obviously when you're looking at that city growth and how it's changing, I guess there's a misconception that people on the fringe still need to be close to the city because they're coming to the city for work. And this is, I guess, how people, it changes how people live. So people who grow up around those outer suburbs that become teenagers and decide to go to university and chase white-collar jobs, they tend to move in closer and stay closer to those jobs, and they don't move back out there. But people who go into work in retail, in health, in hospitality, in trades, stay out there. And there's more and more white-collar jobs as well coming up in those activity centres, like, for instance, if we're talking Melbourne, like a Dandenong or a Ringwood, or a Werribee out in the western suburbs, and obviously there's others around the city, and it's a pretty common theme that governments want more jobs to be decentralised so that there's white-collar jobs within 30 minutes drive of those.
And I invented the term rent vesting, obviously. And what that means, for those who don't know, is it means you go and rent where you want to live and where your lifestyle wants to be, and you invest where you can afford it, ultimately.
I thought it had something to do with like wearing like jackets with no...
And I invented that, and you've done the same, they've copied me. But are we thinking that's something that's happening? Is there a trend towards that? Because you mentioned lifestyle before, people go to holidays, but I think the longer you're out of the property market, the harder and harder it gets. If we look at the $122,000 purchase, the property just got valued at $700,000, so to buy just that property today is much more difficult.
Yeah.
But the longer you're out of the market, in 10 more years, property's worth 1.5, so you've missed out further.
Yeah.
Is that something people are getting on board with and doing, or is that just something we talk about in this office that isn't really evolving out there in the market?
What's your view, Boz? Before I jump
You
in?
take it, because I've got a bunch of questions here. I'm trying to keep them in before they rattle off the screen.
So there is a group of, there's a pretty steady number of people who are doing the rent vesting. However, there's a growing number of young people who are doing the rent vesting, but not with property. They're putting their investment into things like Bitcoin and crowdfunding platforms and things, because it seems a bit more, I guess, it's got a bit of vibe and seems a bit more exciting.
Really safe investments.
Oh, and we've all heard about the grandma who invested, bought a $10,000 Bitcoin that became $19,000. The person who bought it and sold it for $7,000 and lost most of their money. So, but we all focus on the one that made the money.
So we're getting keep the questions coming in, everyone. Great to see Matthew, Rowan, Miles, Robbie. Multiple questions from Robbie as always. Welcome, Robbie. And others. Usual questions around, I guess, where we see the market. But there's a really, I guess, a topical one here from Miles, who has just rubbed it in that he's sitting at home with a whiskey in hand. What's our take on the RBA rate announcement this week and Frydenberg's outlook to stimulate things?
Robbie, Boz wants to know the Bombers score, so...
No, Matt Nash has already told me it's a good start, and I asked him what the score was. I'm waiting for an answer, so...
Boz is a big Bombers fan. He's quite upset that he's here, actually. So he'd rather be home with the Scots watching the footy.
Love Q&A.
Yeah. So I think with
the
so I think with the RBA decision, obviously, to keep them on hold, I think the comments that came out of it from the RBA were a little bit more positive about the global economy and things, I guess, closer to home as well than people were expecting. The Australian dollar bounced a little bit as a result of that, which goes against what the RBA wants to happen, which is to keep the dollar low because it promotes more exports. And sorry if I turn up the geek a little bit more, but with that low Australian dollar, I mean, it's the first time that Australia's posted a surplus in decades.
40 years or something, isn't it? 42 years?
Yeah, so that low Australian dollar is really helping, and that's obviously a great thing for us because it means we're exporting more and we're bringing more money into Australia, which is going to help to stimulate other areas of the economy. So they don't want the Australian dollar to pop back up. I think Josh Frydenberg tried to jump on some of those comments. I guess there's still a lot of headwinds in that economy, and there's probably some uncertainty globally. My biggest concern is that Trump's a bit loose, and who knows what he's going to do. But let's hope he looks after his own pocket and he doesn't push things too far. But do you have any thoughts, Boz, yourself?
No, I mean that's I guess all kind of key stuff. The thing I come back to is what Trump thinks on a Thursday versus what he thinks on a Monday, and all of these factors. It's not like one thing affects the property market.
Absolutely.
Not even two or three things. And on any given day, there's probably 20 things that are changing. So understand that whether we're in 2008, we're in the middle of the GFC, we're in a recession, we're recovering from it, we're in a growth phase, all these factors are changing. Stick to your strategy. Do what you can on any particular day to improve your situation, and long term you're going to be all right. So, that's kind of the approach that I take. Welcome, Ben. Ben's a self-confessed first-time poster, so we might address his question. What would we consider a normal rate of duplication? I think that's supposed to be for someone in their 30s. I.e., would buying a new investment property every 3 years be considered normal?
Who wants it?
I'll happily take it. Okay.
Right up your alley.
Okay. Absolutely, Ben. So basically, I like keeping things simple. So any investment property, right, is must do two things for us. The first thing is grow in value. The second thing is bring in cash flow, i.e. always be rented, always have a tenant, be bringing in maximum tax benefits. What that means is that said property costs you very little money, if anything, out of your pocket to hold. So what that means is that you've got ample available cash flow to be able to put into other investments once that growth happens. The rate of growth is going to be dependent on what your selection strategy is. Okay, so if you're looking at either higher risk, volatile markets, or maybe even regional areas, cash flow is really strong. The trade-off is that capital growth is either rapid and risky, and not doesn't have longevity, or it's going to be a bit slower. If you're sticking to capital cities, obviously they're far more stable. We talk to our clients about looking to duplicate every 2 years. So obviously, lending criteria, what you're earning, borrowing capacity, all those factors play a part. But if the property's low cost to hold, it's not hurting your borrowing capacity too much. If you've always got a tenant, you can easily afford the cash flow for the next one. So 2 to 3 years, without doubt, you're heading into the prime time of your career in terms of wage growth, late 20s, early 30s. So I reckon every third year would be pretty conservative.
Yeah, look, I think the other thing that's important to think about in that aspect as well is in a property cycle, let's talk about a 10-year cycle, you're going to have 7 years of growth and 3 years of correction or slight decline, plateau, but 7 years of growth. And each market around the country, being Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, I've said them in that order on purpose, they tend to move at different times. So if you can be making sure that you're making the right investment at the right time, take advantage of the upswing, then as the next market starts to move, you use your equity, you move into that one, you can absolutely use a 10-year cycle, absolutely grow your portfolio and build, I guess, a steady stream of long-term prosperity for yourself.
Yep.
And would you say, sorry, just on that as well, that you can expect to do it consistently every 3 years, or is it a bit more fits and starts?
It's just really linear. It just goes directly in a straight line.
Perfectly normal.
Perfectly like this, exactly like that. No, it obviously moves up and down like this, but it's trending upwards. But the line's
a little bit like your haircut.
Like my haircut.
Some days it's radical, some days it's conservative, but generally looking pretty good.
I bought some new hair stuff and I just can't get it right. That's the problem. If I'm being really honest with everyone.
All good. Thanks for joining us, Ben. Great question. So I guess linked to that around the market cycles is Daniel's question. G'day, Daniel. So disclosure, Daniel's actually a client of ours. Just got his second property. First one was in Melbourne. Good equity. That's allowed them to duplicate into Brisbane
within 3 years. Just to answer Ben's question.
Indeed. I don't look after Daniel, but I know that's the case. His question is all the recession talk going to affect the market? And what are our thoughts, I guess, on Brisbane? We recently had a client night, and I thought some of maybe the data you shared around vacancy rates and Brisbane in the press might be helpful.
Okay, so just obviously in regards to the recession, let's touch on that first, or the talk of the recession. So I think any talk of a recession is potentially a little bit overdone. So yes, GDP growth's down a little bit. We've still got a pretty solid unemployment rate. Yeah, we're not seeing wages growing as fast as we'd like, but it's still a pretty good unemployment rate. There's a lot of stimulus coming into the market, so we've got low interest rates, in fact record low interest rates. We've also got infrastructure spending from state and federal governments at record highs as well. The amount of money that the government is pumping into the market, and I suppose just touching on that, when we talk about cycles in property, and there's obviously cycles in the economy as well. And it tends to be when the economy starts to get overheated, the government tries to dampen that, and they use tools gently to try to dampen the growth so it doesn't get overheated. We don't see really high inflation. But they tend to, eventually those tools turn it off a little bit more than they intended, because you can't factor in everything that's going to happen around the world, and obviously we mentioned Trump's trade wars. So what happens as a result is they start to worry that they're not going to be able to get voted back in the next election. So they go, let's throw what we can at this to turn around. And they basically pull out bazookas and try to blast this thing with every bit of ammunition they've got. So by the time you factor in, you've got APRA changing the lending guidelines again to make it easier for people to get loans. You've got interest rates coming down. You've got like unprecedented federal government intervention and stimulus, among other things that are all happening at the same time, and I've never seen anything like it. So while this uncertainty is going, I think it's going to continue to result in more and more stimulus. There's already talk of more coming in. I think it's next March. Josh Frydenberg was saying the other day about another wave of stimulus that they're looking at in terms of business tax cuts to promote investment. So these things will be really stimulatory for asset prices. And we saw what happened in the US after the GFC. They did quantitative easing and a bunch of other things. The only thing that really took off first was house prices. And after house prices took off, other things came on the back of it. So our government's absolutely trying to prop up the housing market and get more growth out of it, which is great for us as investors.
Quantitative easing, for those viewers amongst us that haven't heard that. In English, please, Matt.
All right, so quantitative easing or QE, essentially when interest rates get to the point where they no longer stimulate the economy by dropping them further. So the US got them down to zero, and they thought we can't start charging people to put their money into the bank. So what they do instead is they start buying, so the Federal Reserve, or if the Australian government or Reserve Bank did it, the Reserve Bank would start buying government debt. So we might have government debt that has 10-year maturity at 3% interest. The Reserve Bank would buy that and say, here you go, here's a loan at 0% interest instead. Or they'd go to a bank and say, hey, here's some money at 0% interest. Can you please go and invest that somewhere? And they start exchanging short-dated debt facilities for much longer-dated debt facilities.
So
I think Dan regrets his question. Dan, don't ask that again.
Governments pump money into the economy to stimulate things, yeah?
So when you're getting money for free, what do you do with it? You go and invest it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
All good. Here's a really topical one that we might take advantage of given Matt's development experience. So Rowan's chimed in and said he'd love to hear a little bit more about Resi Fund. Okay. And then he followed up with another one, probably a very basic question. He's interested to learn how the returns are realised for investments made within the fund, not linking at personal advice, of course, just general. Could you maybe just, I'll caveat this by saying we've got a webinar that I'm presenting coming up in a couple of weeks on Tuesday the 24th of September at 6 p.m, where we'll be covering this in a bit more detail. So jump onto opencorp.com.au and register if you're interested. But could you maybe just talk to people a summary of what Resi Fund is and why we've done it, what it offers?
So I mentioned earlier that we've had over 100,000 people come to us over the last few years and seeking to get into the property market, and a lot of them just don't qualify because of that financing constraint. Their deposit's too low, or they can't qualify for a loan. So about 3 years ago, we started trying to help overcome this, and it took us a pretty long journey. We went all the way around the world, trying to find the best model and try to understand what that model looked like, who was doing it the best, even looking at individuals around the world like Harry Triguboff, and there's a guy in America called Donald Bren who kind of follows a similar model, and their model is to grow a portfolio of income generating assets, use the income they're generating with low gearing to help them buy more income generating assets and continue to grow it. So you see through different market cycles, and I think even through this recent downturn, that Harry Triguboff's wealth grew by about $2 billion, which is an incredible amount considering property prices, where most of his wealth is held, we're actually trending downwards. So
no wonder you love him.
Yeah. So that was obviously a model that we were focused on pretty closely, not necessarily high-rise buildings like Harry does, but certainly the growing the portfolio. And we realised that it's really similar to what we've been doing for the last 20 years, which is buying assets, adding value to them, renting them out, using the value we're creating and the income we're creating to do it again. So essentially, Resi Fund is a managed investment trust that allows investors, and I hope that's a term everyone's comfortable with, managed investment trust that allows all investors to, buy a share of the portfolio of assets that we hold. So we're constantly growing it, and the investors get a share of the income, share of the capital growth.
So if we own 1,000 properties in our Resi Fund, and I turn up and say I've got $10,000, can I please enter your portfolio?
Yep.
I own a part of 1,000 properties.
That's right.
That's
so the minute you invest $1, that $1 is spread across all of the assets, and you're getting a small share of every dollar that comes in.
I know the answer. I'm asking the question so you can answer them. So what are the advantages? Do I reduce risk in things? Like what are the advantages of me doing it that way versus my own?
Yeah. So because of the low gearing that we have in the fund, obviously it's an ultra low, risk portfolio that we're trying to establish, and because of low gearing and the types of properties that we buy that are generally high yielding, it's cash flow positive, so it generates cash and puts money into your pocket without you needing to borrow. So that's obviously one of the advantages, and the other is that obviously, depending on which part of the investment life cycle you're at, it either allows you to get into the market a lot sooner because you can invest from as little as $1,000, and if you're halfway to saving for your deposit and you've got 30 grand, you need to get to 60 perhaps. If the market takes off, well, that $60,000 deposit you need might go to 80 really quickly if you're not in the market. So it allows you to get in the market and ride that growth. Now to come back to the initial question, which is how do the investors get or benefit from that? I suppose there's two ways. So one obviously is that the unit price goes up. So in addition to the income that you generate, the unit price goes up in line with valuations of the properties within the portfolio. And the other is that over time we will reallocate our portfolio. So we'll sell assets when we've made a great gain, and we might have held it for 5 or 7 years. And it's a little bit different to how you might do it if you're holding property just in your own name, because we're managing a big portfolio. We want to make sure that we're allocating that portfolio to where the market's more likely to go up. We're making sure that we're maximising the tax benefits for investors. So if we sell an asset that's made a profit, that capital gain also gets passed through to the investors holding units in the fund.
Nerd alert.
So basically it's a way where the most powerful way to create wealth is to use your borrowing capacity, cash or equity, to build a high-performing portfolio based on compound growth. Yeah. But if you are trying to get into the market, or you're in an asset-rich, income-poor position, it's a really good way to be able to either grow your deposit quicker or turn your assets into a retirement income at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think another way to look at it is we often hear from people who say, can you help me with an exit strategy? I've got 8 properties, I've got some debt on them, how do I get out of them, what do I do? Well, an option there is obviously you sell down your assets, you get rid of your debt, and you can put some money into Resi Fund, generating a stronger income. Yeah, that's another benefit
you
that
the
fund offers.
You no longer have the debt, you don't have to deal with management, maintenance issues.
Yeah, you're not on the hook for the debt. And I guess I probably see it as Boz said, when you're entering the market, you're exiting at the other end, there's some great opportunity there in the Resi Fund. And in between, yes, you build your own portfolio where you've got the control over your own assets.
In 10 words or less, Louis, for Robbie, can you invest your superannuation fund into Resi Fund?
Give me one word.
I can answer that in 10. Yes.
Fantastic.
Lace
out handball. All right, there's a great question here from David. We might we'll come back to exit strategies because that's a good one. But good question here from David. Hi lads. Many buy an underperformer as their first property. What metrics do you consider before you recommend to bite the bullet and decide to sell and buy something else? Not a cheap or easy decision short term, but long term probably a good idea.
Yeah, okay, well, something I was thinking about before the show is that there's lots of talk at the moment about regional property growth and the benefits of investing regional, because I guess you hear the saying, all ships float in a rising tide, and we saw it in the last strong Melbourne growth phase. All these little regional towns started to get great growth, and people started saying, well, that's fantastic. I'm going to go and buy a property in Bairnsdale. I'm going to buy a property in, I don't know, Swan Hill, wherever it might be, because they saw reasonable growth, which was a reflection of Melbourne just gone through an enormous boom.
Sure.
But you tend to wait another 15 years plus before you get that sort of growth again. And I think when you're looking at the different types of properties you're invested in, there is always going to be compelling reasons to buy one, but at a point in time, you need to look at the fundamentals of that asset and say, do I sell it down? Do I bite the bullet? Do I move it? And I think some pretty easy metrics, isn't there, that you guys would look at to get you there?
As in when to reallocate?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. It's what are your selling costs? It's what are your stamp duty costs to buy a new asset, and probably then what do I expect over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years in performance?
The one thing I'd say in the existing landscape is how does it change your borrowing capacity? So where existing debt is loaded quite heavily, if selling an underperforming asset frees up enough borrowing capacity to allow you to get into something far better, that's going to be a key indicator as well, because you may well be on the sidelines for longer than you expect.
Yeah. And it doesn't always necessarily need to be an underperforming asset. So just to give a, let's put my hand up and say, yes, I've made some investment mistakes, although this probably doesn't sound like a mistake when I explain it. So when my wife and I, well, Claire and I, bought our first house together just before our son was born, it had a bit of sentimental value. We upgraded just 2 years later, but we decided to hang on to that property and rent it out. Now that property was a $1 million property that we were renting. We were losing $20,000 a year on the interest holding costs, but we waited 3 years before we kind of bit the bullet and said, all right, we got to get rid of this. Now we were fortunate that we made a couple of $100,000 gain, but for most people, holding a property that's costing you $20,000 would absolutely destroy your ability to buy another property if you could actually cover that. So that's, for us, it was not necessarily about the gain we were making. We thought we made a good gain in that period. We weren't going to continue to get it. So we sold what many people would probably say is a high, well-performing property to reallocate that to something else that had a lower cost to hold.
We had some interesting discussions about that in the office, didn't we? Matt's strategy of getting emotional and retaining an investment that was high cost to hold.
And the good, really, probably don't want to gloss over it, the really key point there is the 20,000 a year out of pocket holding cost. And what could that be in probably two or three other properties in terms of holding costs that are worth more than $1 million, can probably grow at a better rate, and it was a stupid investment.
That's right. We set him straight and realigned him with his property mentors, and he got some fairly direct feedback. So there's a question's come in from Jeremy. Can you guys talk a bit about the upside/downside to dual living houses/duplexes? I presume that's as an investment, and the advantages of single dwelling on a block, if there is any. I've got a couple of key ones, but
you fire away.
All right. Jeremy, if you were listening at the start, I said that we want an investment property to be able to do two things for us. First one is to grow in value. Second one is to bring in cash flow. The duplex or associated house, I think they're called in Queensland, which is effectively dual income property, is great for the cash flow component. But where it really falls down, and why we don't look at that as part of our investment strategy, is purely around the growth side. So when I say we don't look at it, we tested it, we trialled it, we investigated it, and basically the barriers that we found were that a single dwelling with a shared wall, let's say there's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, for example, on one side, and a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom on the other side. When a valuer went out to value that property, it was valued as a single 5-bedroom house. So given that the costs to build are far higher on the duplex / dual income type property compared to what a single dwelling is, and you look at rental yield, tax benefits of the single dwelling still allow you to be able to duplicate effectively, it's great for a bit of extra cash flow. But if it's limiting you, if you're stuck with that one and you can't get into the next one and can't get into the next one, from an overall portfolio perspective, you're way behind, because I think we'd all take 100,000 in capital growth over $100 a week positive cash flow.
Yeah, and probably further than that, as most people should know who've dealt with us, that we only put clients into investments that we've made or where we would invest in them. So Boz talked about guinea pigs and the duplexes. Well, I was a guinea pig in that aspect. We looked at it and I thought I liked the idea of it, so I went and did some, which I'm currently looking at divesting out of. And the reason for that, or the hardship I found with that, is that when you own an asset of any type, whether it's property, whether it's shares, whether it's anything, you need to have an asset that's appealing to the highest chunk of the market as you can. Everyone knows a bell curve. When you're right in that 80% tile where everyone wants it, with a duplex, you're nowhere near that, because who are you going to sell it to at the end of the day? Your only option is an investor, and your only option is an investor who likes that type of asset. So families are out, first home buyers are out, most people are out, you're stuck with an investor, so it's a very hard sell. So when valuation time comes and you want to grow your equity, to grow your wealth, to buy another property, The valuers know that, and the valuers aren't overly kind towards it, so you end up seeing that asset's not growing in value, not adding to your portfolio, but gets a reasonable yield in the rent, but that's not going to do it for you in terms of building wealth long term.
Perfect. Alrighty, so I think we keep the questions coming through, guys. They're really good.
What is the footy scores?
Haven't had a footy score for a while. While we're working on that, maybe someone can post how the Bombers are doing. Saints clearly aren't in the final, so that doesn't matter for these guys. Let's just cycle back to exit strategies we were talking about maybe 10 minutes ago. If you've got a question, by all means, send it through. Typically, maybe to cover off for those that might not be aware, the main exit strategies until things like Resi Fund and so on came along were really, number one, to live off the positive cash flow, live off the rental. The second one was to sell down some of the portfolio to effectively, I guess, maybe buy 5, sell 2, pay the debt out off on the other 3 and improve the cash flow position. The third one's living off equity. Haven't got 10 minutes to go into it tonight. Jump on our YouTube channel. Just look for OpenCorp living off equity. There's an 8-minute video there where I explain it. It'll easily help you understand that. And then the fourth one was obviously passing it on to your family. And then what we call the Steve Lewison special, the Domino Effect.
The domino.
Which one's going to explain what your dad's strategy was that we nutted out over lunch?
All right.
Quite passionately back a few years ago.
That was the same day we discussed the benefits of blue chip versus the stuff we talk about.
Indeed.
So it's me, is it you?
I can talk about it. So the domino effect effectively is using your rents and using extra rent as you pay further houses off to pay down your debt. So as an example, if you owned 10 properties, you had debt against 9 of them, use the rent from the 10th to help pay off the 9th, then use the rent from the 10th and the 9th to pay off the 8th, 10th, 9th, 8th, pay off the 7th, dominoing down your rent gets faster and faster as you go along, because less debt, same rent, or increasing rent year on year, pays you down really fast.
So I'll add to that, because I did the modelling for Dad, because he came to the son who was good at maths. So essentially for a typical investor using that domino effect, it can be about 15 years for the first property. The next property they pay off within, this is using the domino and just the cash flow. The second one can get paid off in about 7, the third in about 4. By the end, you're paying off a property a year almost, because you've got a very high cash flow. It obviously works very well if you're also working. So while you're working and you're earning an income and you're able to pay those off faster, you're not just relying on that rental income. So obviously that's a key thing for people, I guess, preparing for retirement. That the domino effect strategy may not be the strategy that can work for them, because they want to take that income away and just rely on the properties.
And I think last show we talked about accumulation phase versus growth phase. And I guess all these things in different layers start to come together when you start to look at exit strategies and all the different pieces we talk about. And I'm often surprised how much or how regularly I look at things and go, wow, that links into that and that links into that. So the key bit in that aspect is that you need to go through an accumulation phase and decide, I've got 4 properties in 8 years, that's all I need ever.
Yep.
And then allow the growth to take care of itself, and then allow the rents to grow to start to use that while you're working at the same time to get your dominoes happening in the background.
Yeah, or then you're in a position you can sell 1 or 2 and you're paying off a lot of the debt just from selling one of the properties.
Yep. It's a really good point to mention. There are those 2 distinct phases, right? There's the acquisition, and then there's the consolidation, because if your time window is say 15 years, you don't want to be buying in year 14
at 80%.
Right, at 80%. You're using your equity when you could be using it for the exit strategy. So work as hard as possible early days, get the foundation of the portfolio set up, put your feet up, drink beer, enjoy life, right through to the end goal, and your compound growth outcome will be a lot better.
I touched on regional before, and I'm reading a lot about regional at the moment. What do you think of Collinsville, Boz?
Never heard of Collinsville. Where is it? It sounds like a US TV show or something.
Collinsville is the highest yielding town in Australia.
Right.
Average rents are 22%.
Right.
So average property price 70,000. Is that a good investment?
I've never heard.
You know nothing about it, right? So tell me immediately your concerns with it, because I knew reading it what the problems were.
The fact that there's a rental yield that high probably means that there's maybe 4 properties in the whole town, and it's maybe 500 kilometres from anywhere.
and it's in the middle of a mining town, and there's one employer, and the list goes on, and immediate alarm bells go off. I read an article today saying Collinsville, highest yields, and I guarantee there's people now shopping there because they don't know and understand the fundamentals that drive a market and the risks that come with getting a 22% rental yield being a little bit of rental supply. Like I said, a miner, no doubt.
Yeah.
Mining company, not a miner, not a child. Mining company. And just, it's an absolute guarantee that there's going to be a crisis happening because prices will go up, miners will leave town, mining company go broke, leave, whatever, and correction.
Well,
never sell your house.
What I'd love to know is what the person paid for the property that they just sold for $70,000 to get the median, because when you only sell one, that's the median, isn't it?
the obviously avoiding risk and staying off a current affair is stuff that motivates us. We know that. Maybe for the viewers out there, I'll give you an example. So I met with someone back in 2014, and not big income earners, both husband and wife working, but not big income earners. They had a property in South Headland, bought it for about $260,000, was worth $850 when I met with them, and the rent that they were getting was $1,650 a week. Okay, so I said to them, obviously in the height of the mining boom, understand why with not a lot of PAYG income coming in, that $81,000 a year in rental income is appealing to you. Sell it as quickly as you can. It's not about being right or wrong, it's just a really good example for those that are listening. That didn't happen. That same property today is getting $300 a week in rent, and it's worth $280,000.
And will it ever sell?
Well, unless we have another mining boom that was like that, and the rent goes up, and there's actually people out there that will find that appealing and take a short-term view. That's probably the only way it'll happen.
It's hard to imagine that mining, that resource investment coming back to the intensity that it was.
Pretty unlikely.
Everything that's happening in the world and the move away from those resources.
And look, I don't want to kick the heels into the mining towns, but if we talk regional as a whole, like I said, it's a groundswell at the moment of the benefits of investing regionally, but there's so much risk investing regionally. If two of the big employers in the town shut down, go broke, move location, the town's finished effectively, but that's almost what happens.
Yeah.
Your investment shot. There's all these other things you need to be aware of that just make it a much riskier investment if you're out there chasing growth, or if you're going chasing yield, just the immense impact it can have if things turn the other way, and it just doesn't have the standard market factors that we look for when looking for property for ourselves or our clients.
It's a really, I guess it's a really powerful story. I think of another test case. There was a gentleman I met with who was a senior exec at a mining firm, had 40 properties in all the little mining towns, and basically was in a massive pain point because it's probably as close as you get to insider trading in property, I guess, right? What's going to happen and where the investment's going to happen. Even though that was slated, it didn't all come to fruition. A handful of the properties had been good performers. The majority had been like negative performers. And due to the way the finance was structured, it was just a horrendous situation to be in. So even if people that are working in that game are making decisions and coming unstuck, versus Public, even if you take the advice of your local real estate agent, probably make 5% per annum long term in a capital city. De-risking is really important. So we've got another question here. This is actually probably a good lead, and I was just thinking it's across our August and September shows we haven't had one question on tax. It's generally a pretty topical thing. Thanks for the feedback, Shailesh. Glad you're enjoying it. How/what category can I put OpenCorp fees in for tax deduction purposes? So assume from this that we're talking to a client. I'll take this offline and talk you through it. We have had our fee assessed for tax deductibility based on all of the guarantees and inclusions that we provide, Shailesh. So it's basically breaking down those different components into different areas on the tax return. I'm obviously not an accountant, neither are these guys, so we can't give specific advice, but happy to pass on some guidance there on who you can talk to maximise the deduction there, because we know that it can be claimed.
Yep.
And that's probably a good lead into tax generally. You guys hear it, the phone calls kind of come rolling in most days from clients asking the OpenCorp team to basically validate the advice that they're given from their accountant.
Yep.
More often than not, we're really surprised about just how inaccurate or incorrect some of the tax advice is.
Yep.
It's probably a really good reminder out there if you are getting your tax return done and you're not getting the deductions that you think you're entitled to, or you don't know what deductions you should be getting. Really important to drill your accountant and understand, are they an expert in property? They don't have to be the most expensive, they don't have to be the best qualified, they need to be capable, and they need to understand this subject matter.
Yep. And we do with a lot of accounting groups, and some of those are the largest accounting groups in the country, obviously. And we do a lot of work referring clients back out to them. But I guess the one thing, and I say it about several different consultancies and things like that, is they're not all created equally, accountants. So some are very good at doing your PAYG, but once you start buying an investment property, you got the potential that you're going a bit over their head and you're not getting the best outcome. And I guess the real risk or danger there is that you're costing yourself a lot of money. If they get it wrong, missed deductions, don't use depreciation schedules, aren't claiming fees right, then it can cost you a fortune at the back end of it. And please don't try and save money by getting a cheap accountant down the road, because that costs you even more money. It's about getting the right ones. We can help. Ask us for some referrals.
Yep.
But if you're not certain, ask. But it's really important to get the right accountant.
Definitely.
And in terms of what people should be doing, maybe another way to look at it, what can people be doing themselves to make tax time easier?
Sure. So definitely being prepared and keeping records, like the good old days of keep your receipts in a shoebox, doesn't really work for property investors. That's hard enough with one property, let alone a portfolio of properties. So definitely get on top of your paperwork and a filing system that's effective. Ask your accountant or contact Justin from our office, justin@opencorp.com.au. We've got a pretty standard template there that has most of the deductible items that are on there.
Yep.
Use that as a starting point. Either of those two things is a good place to start.
I'll throw one more out there that I've recently got onto myself, Dropbox. So I've just started Dropboxing everything.
It's just a new thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been using Dropbox for years. Get off my back.
So use that as a repository to keep all your stuff
so
in.
I know, like I use the accountant's checklist. I know what I've got to get them, and I just make a Dropbox folder for each of the things they're after. Just dump everything in that, send them the link.
Done.
Bob's your uncle.
Excellent.
My bookkeeper does it all.
All good. That's all the questions that we've got here, guys. If you have got any last minute questions, by all means flick them through. While I'm just padding out for 20 seconds while any last minute questions come in, a reminder, 24th of September, the webinar, 6 p.m. I'll be presenting, and we'll basically be looking at the life cycle of property investment, how it's changed in Australia, some of the barriers to entry. So perfect for you if you've been trying to get started, not sure how you can actually get your hands on the money through the wealth that you've created, or how you can best build a portfolio. We'll be covering the whole lot. Jump online.
Right. I'm shocked nobody's asked about auction clearance rates.
It's a pretty popular metric that's reported in the media, isn't it?
I hear it daily from people. Just going by lunch, someone talks about it. Go to the building site, someone's talking about it.
Oh, the clearance rate's up.
It's the only stat you need, isn't it?
It was 45, now it's 80.
What is the clearance rate, Louis?
So they're coming out mid-70s, so they're as in final clearance rates. But I think, again, the stuff that I hear people are asking me about is, I've just heard that Sydney property prices are up 1.6% or 1.4% for Melbourne in the last month. So does that mean we all get on Sydney? And look, I think everybody needs to be aware, and that's why I was surprised nobody's asked about this. A few commentators in the media have actually picked up that Sydney's vacancy rate's been absolutely skyrocketing. It hasn't been creeping up. It's going up at a rate of knots. It's sort of mid 3% now, whereas most other capital cities around Australia are either around 2 or under 2%. So Sydney's vacancy rate's going up, which means there's an oversupply of properties in Sydney. So this, I guess, this short spurt they're having in terms of the capital growth and the high auction clearance rates is pretty much due to the low volume of stock that's going to auction. So there's more people coming into the market, but they're competing for at auctions established houses. Not many people selling, so that's what's pushing up the price a little bit. But certainly not something that we expect to continue. And as more and more stock starts coming in spring, it'll be interesting to watch what happens there.
Cool. That last minute jab prompted a couple of others. G'day Trent. Trent up in Queensland. He's a Facebook Q&A live regular. Welcome, mate. Good to see you. Good to have you on board. What are the interest rates doing in the future?
Louis?
Down. Pretty sure that almost every economist at every bank at the moment is forecasting them to drop. When you look at the ASX 30-day interbank cash rate, it's a bit of a mouthful. These guys have heard me say it a lot, which is essentially the rate that banks trade money at for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It's falling, and it's expected to go down about another 50 basis points or 0.5% over the next 6 to 8
A little
months.
tool that I use, Trent, wasn't it?
Trent.
So I'm not like Matt, I'm not studying all these, building worms into websites to find out the answer to these things. If the fixed rates are cheaper than the variable rates, and you can lock them in for 3 or 5 years at a lesser rate, the banks are factoring in that the rates are coming down. Really simple trick that I've always used to understand it.
Yeah. The best indicator on interest rates is the 3-year
Yep.
fixed rate. Yep. Alrighty, Luke's, g'day Luke, thanks for joining us. Hi guys, can I use equity from my family home only to buy a first investment property, or do I need cash savings also to cover other things like bank fees to begin the loan? Great question. No, so I guess the power of being able to build a portfolio, the first property is the hardest one to get because you need a cash deposit. Looks like you've got that with the family home, and if you've got equity in that property, you can then use that equity to cover all of the deposit and costs, including bank fees, stamp duty, as well as the property deposit. So
And some interest if you need it for interest.
yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah. So provided you've got enough equity to cover what those costs are, you can use equity for everything. Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way to do it, without doubt.
Yep.
Yeah. The
Great position to be in. Fantastic.
absolutely, and the number one thing I get really passionate about finance structure, as these guys know, it's really important that you get those loans set up right. It's part of what we share in our individual strategy session with every client, is around how we recommend the finance structure to be set up, because if you set it up correctly, all of the interest that you pay on that equity release to cover deposit and costs is tax deductible. If you set it up wrong, it's not. So, thousands of dollars a year extra that you can get back in your pocket through tax benefits just by getting the finance structure right.
Not to mention cross-collateralisation, risking your house, big word.
Yep.
Several things like that. It's about, you got to get the structure right. So when the time's right, we might be able to talk to you about that.
Sure, yeah. If you want to learn more about that, Luke, drop Justin a line at justin@opencorp.com.au. Check out our YouTube channel. I think it's Finance 101 is where I talk about avoiding cross-collateralisation. You might
really easy.
had a lot of
Just
practice.
rolls off the tongue. I really think about it.
Hopefully you find that helpful.
You gonna go watch the footy soon, Boz?
I can. Love what we do. Looks like all the questions have been answered, and the Bombers are down by about 4 goals. So about what we expected. So we might wrap there, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks to Louis for jumping on board in Cab's absence today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month, first Thursday of every month. OpenCorp Facebook Q&A live. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.